Uh, so today, as I said, is webinar number 4 of our international webinars of this project, Nonprofit All Inclusive. And our guest is Haris, who is going to talk about social media and how to do them for nonprofits with big impact and small investments. You're welcome, Haris. The word is yours and floor.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. So, I'm Haris, and today we're going to speak about social media on a budget, big impact, small investment, or with other words, how to do marketing for nonprofits on social media. So, I think we can just dive in like right away. So, who am I? As I said, I'm Haris. I'm actually originally from North Macedonia, but currently live in Sweden. I've been working in the sector of nonprofits for about like 10 years now, and specifically with marketing and communication for about like 8 years and so on. So what I'm gonna share with you today, it's basically what I've learned so far about social media and how you can leverage that. So what we're gonna cover today specifically, it's building a community in the nonprofit world, understanding our audience like a little bit better. Then we're gonna cover the storytelling parts and also like finding which platform is the most suitable for our organization slash NGO, why SEO matters for nonprofit organization, and also how to build a content strategy plan. How to build a content strategy plan, it's more or less something we're gonna talk on each slide. So please like pay attention. Um, moving in or like moving on, the first part that we're gonna focus on it's building a community in the nonprofit world. Why specifically community? I mean, today I think there is like a trend of replacing the word like membership with a community. And I think that you're aware what the difference between these two are. So I can like move forward. But if you don't understand the difference between a community and a membership within the organization, of course, let me know and I can explain further. But when it comes to building an online community, there is a small definition here that I've inserted, and that is about a group connected by shared value or purposes in the digital world. And in order to build that audience, or community, we have to understand several different things. One of them being like our audience, which we're going to talk about like in the next slide. It's important to be authentic and transparent, to create safe space for interaction, to highlight the mission, the shared purpose, to empower your community, to stay consistent and accessible, to celebrate and recognize contributions, and so on and so on and so on. So when it comes to like understanding your audience or identifying your audience, I'm gonna take an example, or I'm gonna take my nonprofit where I currently work with, which is the Swedish Youth Federation for LGBTQ rights here in Sweden. So I will use my current job as an example in some of the slides that are coming up. So who is the target audience and why are they important? So in this picture, you can see there are 12 different archetypes that are used for brands, companies, and NGOs to identify how they are seen from a consumer perspective. So now this framework should help you define not only the branding aspect, but also the target audience. Who are they and what is important like for them? So for RFSL Ungdom, which is a Swedish Youth Federation for LGBTQ rights, our audience is defined into 3 different categories. The first one being the seeker, the one who needs a community, has a desire to develop relationships and connection with like-minded people, who is curious to learn, has strong interest, and wants to find their space in the community. The second is the change maker. And the third one is the ally, people who basically want to support our organization for various of different reasons. Now you can use this like same archetype to recognize when it comes to your organization or like your NGO, what the audience is. This is basically how we see them, but how do they see us? That's defined into different categories. One of them being that we are seen as a rebel, which basically means revolutionary, change minds and expose society, disrupt the ordinary and so on. But also we are seen as the caregiver, as we support like our community, we shed light on different problems, we're compassionate, empathic, and so on and so on and so on. So you will see this like later on in the presentation, in the PDF document that will be sent to you. So please dive into the archetype like a little bit more if you need help in identifying these groups. We're not going to focus on this so much as there is so many materials like we have to go through. So NGO in the world of social media. So I think this is general for all of the organizations that like existing out there, including ours. And this is basically the purpose. Why are we on social media, or like the bigger picture? And some of the things that I've highlighted here are basically raising awareness, building a community, advocate and inspire action, educate and inform, and drive growth and membership. So each of these has a sub goal. So for example, raise awareness. Here the sub goal is to like educate and inform the public about our cause, our mission, and also the issue that we want to address. Building a community, like the sub goal here could be to create spaces where supporters, donors, and beneficiaries can connect, share experiences, but also feel part of a larger movement. And then of course the advocate, like the educate and so on, have their own sub goals. But the actionable steps in all of these are the following four. So first, what we want is that the people start noticing our organization and want to know more. The second step would be that they're intrigued and start following our social media channels, that they visit our website and become a member. And the last step would be that they engage within our organization. So with that being said, the next part is about which platform should we focus on. And I think this very, very much depends on our demographics, the target audience, as well as the time. I think that it's super easy to create accounts on every platform, but then it's going to be extremely difficult to maintain and be at all of them at the same time. So there are few things that we have to consider when it comes to choosing the right platform for us as an NGO. One of them being the audience demographics, and then the question, are we trying to raise awareness, drive donations, recruit volunteers, or educate the audience? Which of these four? Sometimes they can also be combined, but often like different platform is used for different things. Further on, we should look at our like a similar organization like ours. Let's say if we are an LGBTQ organization in Stockholm, then we have to like look at other LGBTQ organizations, how they are doing their social media, on which platforms they are on, and also what kind of engagement are they getting. Further on, we should evaluate like the platform's future. So for example, there is a potential to go viral on apps like TikTok or like IG, like Instagram, Reels, etc., which is going to be quite like difficult to achieve at Facebook or Threads or X, and so on and so on and so on. So super important to consider is that you have the time and the skills for video, graphics, and written content. Let's say Threads is a written content app. Facebook, it's a combination of everything, while TikTok is pretty much a video-driven like app or a platform. And then also the last one goes into what is the capacity to create and manage content. So the platforms that are suggested here are Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, X, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, and YouTube. And further on, I'm going to focus only on Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn for the nonprofits. Obviously, YouTube is very good, but YouTube serves mostly when it comes to like in-depth content tutorials and educational videos. Snapchat, it's more for like a really young audience. It's authentic, quick content. They have quite some features in there, and they've recently done like an upgrade to the app, so definitely something to look for. But it's also like an app that not everyone will understand. LinkedIn, it's obviously for professionals, business to business partnerships, recruit volunteers and stuff and so on. X or X Twitter, it's pretty much about like real-time updates, advocacy, and so on and so on. I think that TikTok, more or less, being viral campaigns, short form storytelling form, while Instagram being a combination of images, videos, where you can build a little bit of a bigger following. To move on, how to go viral on social media. And I think this is something we're going to talk in the following slides, like a little bit more in depth, but just very short, that in today's world, no one can really know how to go viral on social media because it's literally like a game of luck. But we're going to talk about how to create a good content that has a potential to go viral. With one thing to consider is that the social media apps or platforms are constantly changing more or less like every 3 to 6 months. So what is possible to do like now might switch for like later. So it's kind of like, good to also keep it simple in some kind of like way or form. When it comes to creating the content, I think that giving free high quality content that people would otherwise pay for helps every NGO like stands out, because this is pretty much the work that like we do. Each one of us does work, or like each of the organization do work that is like often given out for free. Method materials, books, videos, you name it. The list goes on and on. But the question that we should ask ourselves is, why would followers share our content, or why would they engage with the content that we create? And here I've listed like 6 different reasons. One of them being that it resonates emotionally, or or is like highly relatable, that it sparks joy, makes them laugh, or entertains. Sharing makes them look knowledgeable or socially conscious. It helps them express their values, experiences, or opinions. It simplifies complex topics, or it makes them feel seen, heard, and understood. And this is pretty much covering the storytelling part of like, if you put yourself in a position of a consumer, like on social media, why would you like to engage with a post of someone? Why in some posts we only press like and we move on, while in other posts we take some time to write a comment and engage and share our opinion and so on. And why in the third way, we basically share it on our social media further because we feel that there is like a value in it and we want like other people to know about it. So now we're going to focus on the platforms that I find like the most relevant for most of the NGOs. And the first one is Instagram. So Instagram, it's pretty complicated app that keeps on changing drastically over the couple of years, especially the last couple of months. And this has to do very much with the competition of TikTok, competition of Snapchat, and like other apps that are like currently uprising. When it comes to the content itself and the post frequency, I have seen a lot of different ways of doing this, and that we are encouraged to produce content and like publish as much as possible. But I think we should also like be aware that we are working in a nonprofit organization. Usually there is like one communicator, or usually there is no official communicator, and it's just like a few of us trying to gather ideas and try to like get the word for our projects out. And that can be extremely time consuming. From what I've seen through different reports, is that in order to stay consistent and in order to make it work, you should keep it simple. But to maximize engagement, you basically should post one reel per week, one carousel post, and like one single post. You can ask me later if this is unclear, and I can like explain what it actually means. And obviously use stories to maximize the views by sharing, for example, your content from the feed to the actual story. But you can like take it like a level further and like use the different stickers when it comes to quizzes, questions, polls, and so on. So the idea is like to not overwhelm your followers and platform, but like rather to provide them content and also provide them the time for the content to sink in and also work with the algorithm. Uh, of course, if you want to get like more exposure, you should try to work with like ambassadors, volunteers, activists, however you call them, and really take the use of the tool of collaboration posts so that the post becomes like, visible on both of your profiles at the same time. In that kind of case, you share likes, you share comments, the list goes on. So in order, and this is a very practical thing, in order for your content to be pushed forward and to be recommended to people who are not your followers, they should not have any watermarks, which means they should not be taken out from TikTok, from YouTube, or anywhere where a watermark can be. However, you're of course welcome to include your logo because that's a bit different. Use audios on posts and carousels. I think that's quite like important, and obviously it doesn't have to be like just any random song, but rather maybe like something, if the post is very about mental health, then maybe the music is like more soft. So kind of think about those perspectives. Reels, they used to be 60 to 90 seconds long, but now you have the possibility since last week to have reels up to 3 minutes long. Obviously have original content if that is possible, but feel free to look for inspiration in other places and make sure the account is in a good status. And you can check this by going to the account in the settings and see whether your account is shadow banned. Let's say if you're an organization that shares a content like political content or shares a content that can be like about like suicide or something like that, that the Instagram algorithm can see as something they should like, shadow ban for like whatever reason, they will do that. So just make sure that you go back in and that you check your account like, every now and then if you feel that there is like no likes or no interaction like coming in your way. The good thing about Instagram is that they have this like scheduling like tool in which you can like schedule and plan your post like way in advance, like up to 1 month long. So if you're a person that doesn't have the time to work on social media every single day, you can choose one day a week where you can create content. Let's say in my organization, we currently post 3 times a week. We post like on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and we use this like scheduling tool to schedule the post up to 1 month in advance. So then, for example, we spend like 1 or 2 days on creating content, then we schedule it, and then we leave it there, and we just go back in every now and then to see whether there is comments or something we have to take action on. So tips, according to the latest statistics, Instagram actually recommends, or letter.com recommends, that you should schedule your post at 5 a.m. in the morning, so that the algorithm warms it up a little bit. And that means that by the time people wake up at 6 or 7 to start getting ready for work, and when they're like scrolling through social media, they actually get to see you post first. But I think that it should be like completely fine to post anytime between 7 a.m. Or 7 p.m., preferably 7 a.m. Or late at night. And also change your scheduling post like scheduling time every 3 months. I will talk about that like a little bit more later on. When it comes to TikTok, TikTok is all about authentic, engaging video content. So, for example, if you're using Canva, those who are familiar with, to create content for TikTok, don't do it. It's not gonna go well. It's not gonna be seen, and it's not gonna be pushed forward. So Canva templates doesn't really work for that. You should instead focus on real videos, like with real people, and try to have more relatable content. I can give you so many ideas for this if you actually like one, but to keep it short, anything in a podcast format, like interviews, like story time, let's say story time, having a walk outside, having your phone and a selfie, and just be like, okay, here I am to share 3 tips about how to do marketing for nonprofits. The first thing you should know, XYZ. and just keep consistent with basically branding that like aspect, and just continue replicating those videos in order to gain followers, and to kind of like, reach a certain audience that is interested in that topic that your NGO is working on. There is a storytelling framework when it comes to like TikTok, and this is the hero, which is our audience. In my case, that would be like LGBTQI youth seeking community. Then the challenge is the struggle that they face. For example, discrimination, isolation, loneliness. The guide is basically us providing support and tools. And the resolution is like how the hero, or like our audience, overcomes challenges through our help. So this is basically the structure that you should think of. What is your audience? What kind of challenges they have? How do you guide them to navigate through those challenges? And then the resolution on like how it actually happens at the end. So primary focus areas for every single platform, I think for NGOs, I'm gonna focus here like on TikTok, is basically the number one, who we are. And this highlights our mission, our vision, and the impact that our organization strives to achieve. The second one, it's focusing on get involved / become a member, join our organization. And here we encourage supporters to take action, whether it's becoming a volunteer, becoming a member, maybe starting like a local chapter of the organization. It can be like a variety of different things of getting involved. But even if it means that they maybe like want to get an internship in the organization, or they just want to volunteer for a day or two. The third one focuses on membership campaigns through storytelling. And this is like where we use impactful stories to showcase the transformation and the benefits of joining your organization. So, for example, before joining and after joining, we currently have a campaign called My Journey with RFSL Ungdom, in which we have chosen 12 ambassadors for 12 months, one ambassador per each. And there, for example, the first video focuses on the journey, how the life of the person has changed as they become member. And then the second one focuses on humanizing the organization by, okay, besides being a member, what else do you do in your life? And because we're like youth from different spectrums, we cover like different topics. The fourth one focuses on leadership, career and participation opportunities, and this is basically everything that your NGO has to offer for the like audience, whether it's like skill development, networking, mentorship, whatever it's there. To move on with LinkedIn, so LinkedIn doesn't require like frequent posting. Quality and relevance are more important in this case, and we should focus on creating content that sparks conversation, such as thought-provoking questions or call for action. As I said, like at the very beginning, LinkedIn is pretty much a professional platform. It should be used mainly for getting donors, getting volunteers, interns if that's necessary, those kind of stuff. The storytelling framework here could be similar to Instagram, which is the hook, the challenge, the guide, the resolution, and the call to action. If this is unclear, let me know later at the end and I can help you out with that. And the primary focus area here that like I see for all the organizations in general are organizational impact, partnerships and collaborations, leadership and opportunities, and community education and awareness. I was gonna save this for like later, but I think I can like say that now. Also, the reason why I'm choosing these like 3 specific apps. So for example, LinkedIn has something called LinkedIn for Nonprofits, which basically means that there is like a certain resources that you as a nonprofit can use. One of them being that like LinkedIn can, for eligible nonprofits, give you free credit so you can use for advertisement when it comes to, let's say, maybe you have a campaign going on of like recruiting new members or recruiting volunteers or wanting to get donors, and you can use this free credit that you have to use within a frame of a month. So look that up. It's called LinkedIn for Nonprofits. Find it on Google and try to see whether your organization is eligible to get these free grants in advertisement. You have the same for Snapchat. Snapchat offers to nonprofit organizations up to like 5,000 euros in credit every 6 months. To move on, as I also have to stay in my time frame, last thing that I want to cover when it comes to social media in this like aspect is basically the use of hashtags. And here there are 5 different types that one should use when creating the hashtag strategy. That is the location-based hashtags, the branded hashtags, the industry hashtags, the community-based hashtags, and the descriptive hashtags. So an example, a location-based hashtag would be, we at RFSL, we are a national office. So just hashtag RFSL Ungdom, that means it's covering everything. But if I use a hashtag RFSL Ungdom Stockholm, I'm using a specific location hashtag that people can find. When it comes to, for example, the second part about like branded hashtags, let's say this is something to be, okay, either RFSL Ungdom, or here I can talk, okay, RFSL Ungdom support chat. Further on, you can go like down to your niche. In our case, it would be LGBTQ rights, youth activism, maybe like LGBTQI community for like number 4 as a community hashtag, just so you understand. And then the part 5, descriptive hashtag, which for example will be, let's say, currently we have a campaign that's about free HPV vaccine. So a descriptive hashtag would be free HPV vaccine. And that's more or less about like the hashtags and so on. They're super good for TikTok to boost engagement. They're very good for LinkedIn, but sadly, they are not as effective on Instagram as they used to be before. But however, you should still use them, but 3 to 5, you don't have to overdo it. And just like see what is the most important for you. Always the first hashtag should be your NGO name, and then the following hashtag should be like one of these. One more part to cover here, it's the SEO, or the search engine optimization. And this ensures that your content gets discovered by the right audience or platforms like Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and so on. And here we talk about 3 different parts. The first part is about boost discoverability, which basically means optimize content that ensures that your profile or posts appear when people search for relevant topics. The number 2 is to attract the right audience, and it's used as a keyword in like Instagram bio, and help the content help connect with those interested in our case, or like our mission. And the third part is about like increasing reach. So in reality, as an example, let's say here I work with a club that is a Swedish biggest gay club in located in Stockholm. And if I just like use the name Club Backdoor Stockholm, that's the main like a nickname on how people like find us by handle. But then you also have the nickname on Instagram, which in this case, for example, if I just like write backdoor, it won't be as easy to find. You kind of really really need to know the name in order to find it. But in this kind of case, I've added like additional information, for example, Stockholm hottest club for LGBTQI and friends. So now if you go on Instagram and you write like gay club Stockholm, our profile will come up. If you go and like write, for example, LGBTQI and friends, our profile will be like the first one, like among the first to pop up. So you're gonna get, you will basically be able to see it like in a much nicer way or easier way, like recommended. Obviously, your bio should be like more descriptive, as I don't know if you can actually see here, but it's dance club and nightclub, and then there's like following information so that people know like right from start what it is about. Further on, if you want to like take this like level further, I mean, there is the website SEO in which each of the pictures for the content should also like use the same name, etc., etc. We can talk about it like later in the questions if you have like any specific for this, but do not use my time as I have to move on. So before we dive into the question, I want to show you like how my content strategy looks like based on everything that we just like spoke. So I'm gonna turn this like slide down, and I'm gonna try to open my actual document. So you're gonna be able to see. Are you still seeing my screen? Yes. And is it like the screen with the Word document?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So here it is, like how one of my documents is structured. So I use Word because it's the most like simple to work with. So in the first part, when it comes to like content strategy, here like up in the header, I've listed all my important links, different statistics and so on. So it's going to be easier to find. I've then further on developed all of these things when it comes to the target audience, like who they are, the seeker, the judgment, the ally. This probably it's familiar from before, like what we spoke at the very beginning. Our core values, diversity, freedom, choice, inclusivity, and then it further then like breaks like all the different content with like example of what we should post and how, what are the creative guidelines. Moving on with further details, so best performing post, what we should like focus more and stuff. And then here I have my, okay, further on, you can see advertisement of the site, reports and graphics, following membership campaigns that I'm working on. So everything that is related in regards to social media. And this is like how one of my document like looks like. So for example, on which platforms am I posting, what kind of content format it is, when it goes live, I write the text and everything. So everything is already ready with information about the people, if there is like a credit to give you and so on. And then I have something called social media statistics is in for which each platform I basically go in at the end of the month and I add all the different numbers. So I can also keep track on how and what has performed the best. And obviously you can have these as a one-by-one post, or you can have it as a in this kind of way. And here it's like this just because this is the same campaign and it's a post that's split into 3 different parts. And this basically later on also gives you like down like different categories, whether it's like an engagement, what kind of subcategory it is, like what kind of like awareness. And this is super good to know like later on when you're filling this kind of statistics analytics, because this is something that is super easy then later on when you do like reports for your projects, or when you want to know what is performed best, you just go here and it's pretty much structured in that kind of way. So that's about that. And now I'm going to leave some space for you and to let me know whether you have questions or not. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to turn to these cameras. I have like 2 different screens and give some space for you to ask your questions. And the questions, are they just in the chat? Should I just go in the chat and read them and then like answer them, or?
You can check one there is in the chat for now.
Yeah. Mickey is asking if I can share the document or like a template. I can make a copy of this document, like erase all our information and stuff like that, and just give you a template if you need something like that to for yourself or for
Can you hear me? Yeah,
NGO.
that would be great to have, please. I think that's the hard part to know how to
Perfect.
start. It is a good way to just
Yeah.
fill out the information and go from there.
Of course, I can definitely do that.
Would be very
Was there
nice.
something else? Was there something else that was like unclear, or that you wanted me that you were wondering about, or that I should cover more in depth?
I don't think so right now. I mean, the hard part is get the time to start making the content. Thank you.
Yeah, but also I think kind of like deciding what kind of content exactly is the one that is the right for us.
Yeah.
And I think that like at the very beginning, the first 3 months is literally just exploring what works best. So, don't be discouraged if you start creating content, you start like posting and you don't see any engagement. That only means that maybe that kind of content doesn't reflect the best with the audience you're trying to reach. So you should also then like, switch it up. And I think that's one thing that actually I spoke with Irina yesterday, is that, we have to kind of think of what kind of platform are we going to use moving forward, and to understand that the content that we are creating for Instagram is not going to be the same content we are creating for TikTok or the same content we are creating for LinkedIn. So we also have to understand, if you're choosing these three platforms to work with, we also have to like be able to create different content as we are trying to like reach different demographics and different crowd in different places.
Yeah, sounds
I have a question. If Micke,
yeah, it's okay.
Micke?
Go for it.
I'm thinking like most of our participants, there are or would work in the youth sector. So they primarily audience are young people, maximum up to 30 years old. So maybe you have some kind of life hacks. What is important to think of in storytelling, in using language, in whatever else? Like, what are the important things to keep in mind, especially for young audiences? And also them, maybe you have an idea how to split even more detailed, like teenagers and young adults and so on.
Okay. This one is quite like broad. I'll take first the perspective of if you try to put ads, I think kind of like it's just important to mention, if you're trying to like put ads for youth, for you content like out there and so on, in order to reach the target audience like up to the age of 17, like right now it's banned by law, but that only means if you're trying to like give them a specific interest. But you, for example, like trying to create a community engagement like ad in that kind of way, you should just do campaign like awareness campaigns, because then you're like allowed to put ads. But if you're thinking about content specifically for social media, I would say think like youth. Think like youth in a way of see what else is there. Don't overproduce your content. Just like sit and have an honest conversation with them. Like literally just put up your phone in front, open, think of it as a live broadcast message, and just talk to them like directly. It's more appealing if the person itself who is talking, it's part of the it's part of the like demographics. It's also youth, and have like certain way of speaking, like let's say the Gen Z style, or now we like most of us like in the millennium like a category. But choose a fight that young people that is trendy for young people at the moment. For example, right now it's very much about mental health, because a lot of youth are struggling with that. There is the social media, yes, but there is a lot of bullying on social media. So maybe talk about that, like a content that will appeal to them in the best way. Or let's say content about identity, because there is a lot of confusion about that, like, who we are and stuff like that. Content about, okay, we talk about adulthood. When is it you have grown up, and when you have to make like, the tough decisions when it comes to like, thinking of your career, thinking of like, your job, thinking of like, all the things that like, comes ahead of you, things that, for example, they won't teach you in school. So think of your social media as exactly that, things they don't teach you in school, and focus on that. Because in school, they're not going to teach you how to protect your mental health. They're not going to teach you how to prevent a burnout. They're not going to teach you, how to handle life in that kind of way. They're going to let you teach math and geography and history and those kind of stuff. So don't try to be smart and tell them what to do, but like rather invite them to the table and just like, speak to them that as you're on the same level. And I think that really much like, changes the dynamics, and understand that there are different interests, for example, youth who are gamers, youth who are like activists and wants to go out on the protests. And this is, for example, where the first slide about identify your crowd really, really matters in order how you're going to speak with them on social media. In our case, we're speaking to the people who are like, seeking community. We're speaking to the people who, are allies and want to support us. And also we are speaking to people who want to change the world. So our message in this kind of case, it's very clear. It's very clear what kind of content we need to put up out there in order for people to feel seen, visible, and heard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. But I'm also thinking, if not in terms of the content, but more in terms of the style, let's say the language itself. I don't know, what are the current trends, you would say, for young people? Using a lot of emojis, or I don't know, shortened words, or what is on
Yeah.
top right now?
So let's say a couple
I
of
don't know,
months,
maybe a lot of colors, or rather like a
Yeah.
strict style in black and white, or
So a
something like
couple of
this.
months, couple of months back was very trendy to like over edit your videos with like all these crazy transitions and like, you know, crazy like editing and colors and so on. And currently what it's very trending, it's to keep it simple. Like literally. So let's say a content that appeals to me, like, you know, so much and so on. It's like me laying down on the sofa right now, having my phone in front of me and just like literally having a dialogue. And it really helps if when you're doing that, you are like, let's say, okay, there are different kind of hooks that you can use that, for example, can grab the attention of the viewer like in the first 3 seconds and to kind of like, you know, first to 3 to 5 and to keep them like stay with you for the rest of the video. And that is like me, for example, sitting right here in this kind of like yoga position, whatever, holding like a cup, like, you know, as almost like I'm drinking, like while I'm talking and so on. So that I actually have to have the viewers focusing on like multiple different things. So that kind of case, they don't care about the edit. They care about like, you know, what I speak. So think about like, you know, you're sitting on a coffee with a friend and so on, and just having that kind of like, so be simple, find your way. This is like also like why I said like, let's say going out for a walk in the nature and your content is pretty much about like, you know, self-tape. When you speak about, have you ever wondered, for example, blah, 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 XYZ. So I would say really just keep it simple because every single content that is currently viral on social media, like TikTok and Instagram, is a content that is simple and it's meant to make you feel like at home. It's the only way like to spark conversation.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Do you, in the video itself, do you need to text what you are talking about? How important is this? Like, you know, like if you are talking something, especially if like activist
Yes.
question, and there is like basically subtitles, but inside the video itself.
Yeah. So just to wrap the previous one, the reason why the content that is like over edited right now doesn't work is because it feels produced and it doesn't feel genuine. So when it feels produced, when it feels scripted, it doesn't like reflect the best on the audience in that kind of way. So you should try to stay away from it. But when it comes to like, let's say the content that we just talked about and you know, like your question, you should definitely use captions every single time. Possibly the caption should, there is like a frame that like works on Instagram, but in order to have the captions like in the best capacity, they should be positioned like somewhere right below the mouth. Still be able like, you know, to give the frame for the face, but to have the, for example, somewhere here, because then they get to like connect like the lips together, like, you know, with the words you're saying. And the reason why you should use captions is that like, let's say you are out in traffic, maybe in the subway or like whatever, scrolling through things and stuff, and you don't always have like headphones, and sometimes you really want to know what they're talking about, so it's easier to just like read rather than like, you know, like listen. So you should always like think of that, and it's super important that the captions are in the same language as the person speaking, because otherwise the algorithm gets confused, because the algorithm follows the words written, but also the words that it hears, and then it can be like confused to like which audience it should be pushed. So the caption should always like stay, if it's on TikTok or Instagram, should always stay in the caption in the language that the person is speaking. And the positioning, it's always like best to be somewhere like, you know, below the mouth, not too low down.
I have also a follow-up question to this. Is there any possibility currently with the AI and so on to do those captions automatically? So let's say that basically your part is to do the recording and then you just put something like press this button and then the captions will appear on the video.
Yeah, there are several different like apps which cost money. I would not recommend them because obviously what we're trying to do here in this presentation is try to, you know, not use money. So instead, if the video is for TikTok, you go to TikTok and before posting the video, you go to edit and there is like a caption option. So TikTok will automatically generate captions for your video, and it's like really, really good, like really well done. So use that feature instead. And then, for example, listen to what it says, because the algorithm sometimes can pick up everything correctly, because you can also choose language, Swedish, English, and so on. And then just basically make sure that you listen to it like fully once again, and to just like make sure that like everything is like captioned correctly. And if not, just click on the word, change the word, and it automatically like, save it in that kind of way. So now you can do this on TikTok, and then you can save the video from TikTok to be able to post like on Instagram. But in order to save it without watermark, you actually have to post it on TikTok, so it shows. There is a feature for that. It's super simple. Also, Instagram has the same feature now, which basically means that if you are trying to post like an Instagram reel, which is like a video format, you also can generate. Then if you go to like the video, you want to post it, and then you press on the stickers, there is a sticker that says caption. So you press on that sticker caption, and you will be able to generate the captions for free. If this is for YouTube, obviously save the video from TikTok or from Instagram, or in the other way, you can always use CapCut. CapCut is the like editing app from TikTok, which the free version gives you like a lot of freedom to edit content, cut, and all this kind of stuff and so on. Or just wait for the new app that Instagram is about to launch within a month, which is called Edits, which will have the same features as well.
And so is it possible to review all these subtitles before publishing, right?
Yes, this is also like what I said before, like you generate the captions, and then you kind of play everything from the beginning, in which you will be able to like listen and see whether it's fully synced. If a word feels off, let's say if I've been speaking in English, then I say a word in Swedish, obviously it's not going to catch it up. So then I can just go in, rewrite that word, and just make sure that you double check before publishing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, right now here we are just like jumping from one thing to another and so on. I think we also had like the conversation yesterday that it's very difficult to pack so much into just like 1 hour. And I feel like what I've done is like rush through everything without like, giving it like proper depth to understand. For this kind of part, would probably like need like a full day, in which we could have also like taken the time to build the structure for each participant who is here and so on and stuff like that. But obviously, due to lack of time and so on, we just have to like run through everything. But if you have any questions afterwards, after this and so on, feel free to share my contact. Feel free to email me. I will like respond as soon as I can with all the possible tips that I have, and provide you with like some additional like links and so on. But a good tip that maybe I can also like leave you with is that most of the apps that are out there or like most of the platforms, like whatever websites it is, like let's say Canva, do have a non-profit feature, which means that if you just like sometimes email them and tell them like, hey, we are non-profit, do you have non-profit discounts and so on, you will often get a free subscription. And let's say link in bio. This is very important. Link in bio, it used to be only one link, but like now Instagram allows up to 5 links and so on. But TikTok, it's still only one link. So there is an app called Linktree, which some of you might be aware of, which basically means a link in which you can gather like all the different links inside and so on. It can look super professional and stuff like that. They have a free version and a paid version, but they also have a version for nonprofits. So if you're a nonprofit and you send them like your nonprofit registration document, you will get a lifetime free subscription with all the features that they have. And they have so many features there, like to sell products, shop, like different shops, stuff and so on, adding links, registration for different forums and stuff like that and so on. So it's pretty broad. So before you make a purchase for anything, always first check whether they have like a non-profit discount or a future. And sometimes even if it doesn't show on Google that they have, if you just email them, they will give you that.
Thank you so much.
You're
Do we have
welcome.
any last questions?
I'm also a little bit like passionate when I speak about like all this kind of like stuff, and so I get like excited, but then I also speak very fast.
Okay, we have just a comment. It's about the whole course in general, so about all 4 webinars. Anita is saying that it was a super great course and she's very grateful for everything she has heard. And thanks to everybody, to Christina, to Irina, and the lecturers who know everything. You're one of them.
I guess that's our job, to know everything and to come into this, like, you know, I mean, obviously you can prepare like so much stuff and so on, but I really hope that like, you know, we can have more space for like conversation, because one thing is this like, you know, practical stuff, and the other thing is to actually focus on like solutions. And I'm pretty sure that like in every NGO, there is a lot of things going on that can be changed, upgraded, made differently and stuff. And sometimes you really need this like outside perspective or someone to bounce back ideas with, who is not part of your organization, because the most complicated things can actually be can be super simplified.